Does it get any better, ladies and gents? No, it doesn't. Welcome to the next the next Rings of Power episodic review, guys. This is episode 5 called Partings. It's the partings of the sea. It's the partings of my belief that this show is going to get any better. It's the partings of me considering cancelling my Prime subscription because Amazon is pissing on my favourite franchise. Deep breaths, deep breaths. An absolute colossal shit show again, unfortunately. Episode 4 was diabolical. Episode 5, in my opinion, was either on par or even worse. It goes without saying, ladies and gents, I'm going to be going into heavy spoilers in this episode. So if you haven't seen episode 5, again, you're not missing much if you haven't. But I will be talking a lot about the plot of the episode. So if you haven't seen it and you're going to watch it, add this to your watch later list and come back at a later time. Likewise, if you want to support the channel, guys, please do leave a thumbs up on the video. Consider subscribing as well if you're brand new. If you want more content like this, feel free to hit the bell icon on the channel homepage and you'll be notified as and when video reviews, TV episodic reviews go live, and any other content that I post. So let's get into it. Episode 5. It starts with the Harfoots, my absolute favourite. Not my absolute favourite part of this show. Colossal shit show, waste of time. We get Nori talking to the stranger, who I'm absolutely convinced is Gandalf. It could be. I love the theory that the stranger is a Maya, or a human form of a Balrog before he goes full Balrog. Some people said it could be Sauron. Some people said it could be Saruman. Could be one of the Astari, so one of the 5 wizards. Who knows? Who cares at this point? I'm getting fed up with the way this show's going, guys. I'm getting less and less interested in the characters that we see, unfortunately. It's going down, not going up in my interest. House of the Dragon, on the other hand, absolutely killing it. I am doing separate episodic reviews for that show as well, guys, if you want to go and check that out. That is worth a watch. This, however, is not. Even if you're a casual fan of fantasy, they are absolutely destroying it. But again, we're in the Lord of the Rings universe here, right? So you need to stay true at least to some parts of the lore. I don't mind if they want to go down an original route. They want to go down a direction that's new, that's fresh, that's separate to the lore that we see and that we know of. But even with that in mind, they're taking a route that is absolutely piss poor. It makes no sense. There's no character development. The characters themselves contradict themselves from scene to scene in prior episodes, in the lore that they are. Some of the creatures in this series look absolutely diabolical. Bearing in mind, this has got a multi-billion-pound budget. So you would have thought you could see the glistening of the tartar on the warg's teeth. But you can't. The warg looks like a pig crossed with some sort of gremlin, and Goat Simulator sex comes to mind. It's some sort of weird Resident Evil splice of just stupidity. It looks absolutely shit. But before I go off on a rant and start going into the things that I hate about this episode, let's go back to the very first scene. Deep breaths. Let's take ourselves to the first opening scene. So we've got the Harfoots. Nori is talking to the stranger about migration. And I want to migrate myself away from this series. And they're talking about the Grove, which I'm convinced is the Shire. So we get a nice little song, a nice little dance of someone singing about moving into the new world, moving into a new passion, about how important family is. And you get an overview shot of the map of Middle Earth, and you get to see the little journey of the Harfoots going through the Grey Marshes, going through the mountains. And I couldn't give a shit at this point. I'm still sat there thinking, I would be okay with this if I was invested in these characters from the off, but I've not been interested in the Harfoots whatsoever. To me, they bring absolutely nothing to the show, other than people are going to look at them and go, oh, look, they look like hobbits. Oh, you know, it's replacing Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. They probably are. That's probably what they're trying to do. But with Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, you had the brilliance of Merry and Pippin's comedy. You had Sam's bravery versus his fear all the time. Frodo was sort of the level-headed of the group. It just worked. The dynamic of their characters and the thought process of their characters worked. With the Harfoots, I can only name Nori. I don't know who Lenny Henry's character is. I don't know who the mum's called. I don't know the friend, the one that's always got twigs sticking out the side of her head. I don't know, and I don't care. Like, they don't bring anything to the show. But anyway, she's talking to the stranger about what good is, that you're a good person, because the stranger's basically still trying to come to grasp with basic language, understanding what he is, what he's about. And obviously they're referring to the events of the last episode where he caused a little bit of damage. And the dad, so Lenny Henry's character, is blaming, or half blaming, the stranger for all the things that are going on in the world. So the dwindling of the trees, the fact that there's no food sort of out there to be scavenged anymore. There's sort of weird weather on the horizon. There's an ill feeling on the air, all that kind of stuff. And they're kind of blaming the stranger. And Nori seems to be the only one that's taking counsel with the stranger and saying that he's the good guy, trying to defend him, saying that he's a good person. And she's trying to convince him of that as much as her own people. So we get that sort of scene. We then, as I said, we get the scene where we're seeing where the Harfoots are traveling. We then get a very brief scene where we see, in the trailer, people thought this was Sauron. So it's the bold last airbender type character where he's got a staff, he's got his hood up. Kind of looks a little bit alien to me, a little bit elf-like. And he's kind of looking into the crater where the stranger fell into. And there's obviously the crater still left over there. And he's kind of doing his mantra. He's got his hand on the crater. And he's obviously absorbing the visions of what happened. So the meteor man falling from the sky. And there's these weird sort of cult-like people looking for him. So we don't, at this point, know who this person is. We don't know who these group of people are. Could be Sauron, and the feeling was that it was Sauron. But there's a lot of theories online and a lot of sort of discussions taking place to suggest that this is not Sauron. Could be, might not be, I don't know. But it's a bit weird that he would present himself as a young boy in a cult-like gown, looking very mysterious, looking very weird. At this point in time, Sauron is kind of in multiple places. It can be in multiple places. But he is the absolute king of betrayal. He's the king of deceit. So he is likely, I think Sauron is likely going to be someone like Halbrand. Someone that's deep in the enemy's council, deep in the midst. He's among the people as a normal person. Probably comes across as he's got a few little bit of, struggles, but overall quite a nice guy. And it's this charm that allows him to get the rings of power out to the dwarves, out to the men, and get them to absolutely succumb to his will, basically. The only race that, obviously, as we know, that doesn't succumb to it is the Elves, and that's because they find out Elrond, Galadriel, Saruman, basically, the White Council, which is formed afterwards, but they all come together and kind of sit there and think, something's not right here. Don't trust this Anatar guy. Don't trust what he's trying to give out. He's being too nice, and the Elves call it, and they don't take the rings. They make their own rings of power, which is where everything else, I would imagine, in future series happens and takes place. But anyway, we see the bold last airbender guy. Then we get cut to a scene where Adar is talking to an orc. He's talking to the orc about the sun. He peels back his sleeve, and the orc is basically getting his hand sizzled like a frankfurter in the sun. And Adar says, "How does that feel?" And the orc's like, "Not great." And then Adar says, "At least you can feel it. Very soon I'm not going to be able to feel anything," which gives the impression that he's going to either change form, he's going to shapeshift, or he's going to die. And this is where a lot of people are saying that Adar is Sauron. Could be. He's got that sort of look to him, especially when we play like the Middle of Earth games, where we see a elvish type version of Sauron, i.e. Anatar. And he's got that weird look. They might have gone with a completely different look for him. Who knows? Anything's possible with this show. They seem to be throwing all sorts of weird logic at their ideas and their writing at the minute. So it could be an absolutely original character. It might not be Sauron. It might not be anyone in the lore. It could just be an absolute original character that they've created purely for the show. But it's a bit strange that he's touching on shapeshifting, and it's a bit suspicious that he's talking about how his form is going to be different, which is, as we know, what happens to Sauron. He pours all of his effort into the One Ring, and obviously that's how he survives. Even when he gets killed in the Lord of the Rings at the Last Alliance battle, where Isildur cuts his hand off, finger off, whichever form of it you look at, and that destroys him, but his essence is contained in the ring, which is why he's still able to survive as almost like a spirit or a ghoul. So we get that scene. We then cut to Arondir and Bronwyn talking to the people of the tower. Not quite sure what this tower is. At first, I thought it was the Tower of Amon Sul, which is Weathertop, because Aragorn talks a lot about the importance of that tower. I don't think it is that tower, but I would love it if it was. If we're going off-piste and we're going against the lore, it would just be nice for Lord of the Rings fans to associate with the fall of that tower. And I've got in my head that when the tower crumbles and it's all distraught and it's ruins, that we get a scene where we can actually make out that it is Weathertop, and it's the Weathertop that we see in the Lord of the Rings. Whereas we know the hobbits and Aragorn stand against the ring wraiths. So I don't know, but I think it's a tower that's more to the east. It's more on the borders of Mordor. It's breaking up the Southlands and what is going to become Barad-dûr and stuff like that. So I think that's where it's placed. But anyway, we get a scene where Arondir and Bronwyn are giving a speech to the people. They're saying the tower's going to be attacked. You know, we're going to be wiped out soon. The weird old guy that basically spoke to Theo in the last episode and said, I'm a follower of Sauron, showed him his little burn on his arm and said, I'm a follower of the Mark as well. And spoke to him about the totem that Theo has, which we now learn in this episode is some sort of a key to somewhere. I think it's the key to either Orthanc or Barad-dûr. It's going to be quite prominent in the future episodes, and I think that's why Adar is so keen to get hold of it. I did think Adar was Sauron, but to me it makes more sense that it's someone that we absolutely don't expect. That's the whole point of Sauron's sort of presence at this point in the timeline. He needs to be undercover. He's a threat. People have heard about him, but it's a little bit like Batman in year 1 and year 2. It's at this stage, it's just a name, it's just a myth, it's just something that's holding fear over people, but not a lot of people have experienced it, not a lot of people have witnessed it for themselves, so it is really just a creature of myth at this point, which is a perfect time for Sauron, and as it is in the lore, to be out amongst the masses, biding his time, making friends, building trust, and then when they least expect it, boom, he's got everyone under his control, which is where the Rings of Power come in. And obviously the 9 rings that were given to men then turn into slaves of Sauron, and then they become so obsessed with the ring, they become so obsessed with the nature of Sauron and what he's about, that they literally lose themselves. They go into the Wraith world, hence where the Nazgul come from. But it doesn't make sense that that's Adar. I think Adar is potentially an original character, or it's going to be a lieutenant of some kind of Sauron, i.e. the mouth of Sauron. It could be one of the Nazgul that later becomes a Wraith, who knows. It could be Agandaur, who's someone that they brought in, you know, when Angband was built and stuff like that, a servant of Morgoth, who knows. There's so many routes that they can go down, but personally, it doesn't really make sense that it's Sauron. It's too obvious to be Sauron, if you see what I mean. And something happens later in the episode that makes me think it's not Sauron because of the way that Adar reacts to a certain line that's said to him. But anyway, so there's a little speech going on with Arondir and Bronwyn. As I said, the old man comes in and says, don't trust the elf, you know, the elves have led us to our doom before, they're going to do it again. And he builds up a little bit of a rebellion against what Bronwyn and Arondir are talking about, because they want to fight Sauron. The people are scared. They're like, how are we going to do this? And Arondir kind of says, you know, if you want to live and you want to be able to grow your families, be able to stand by your Numenorian roots, basically, you have to fight this fucker. And Bronwyn's kind of like, yeah, you need to kind of do, you know, we got to fight him. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to fight him. It's a really silly scene. And just like that, a random old guy who manages to stir up the crowd better than the leader of the people and an elf manages to sort of bide loads of people to his side just by saying, come with me, lads, I'm going to leave. I don't fuck fighting Sauron. We don't need to fight nobody. We can leave. We can run. They've done that before. These people ran from Adar before. We don't know if Adar is Sauron, but let's just say it is. They believe it is. They know what happens. Their Southlands got disbanded. They have no king. They ran in basically tail tucked between the legs, got absolutely nowhere, and they're in this position again. So you would like to have thought they would have learnt their lesson in that running does nothing. They're now being backed into a wall. So from somewhere, some sort of rallying speech from your leader will help you understand that standing and fighting this time is the right thing to do. But there's a random old guy that comes in that seems to be best friends with a lot of people in this group, and he's managed to convince them all to leave. So most of them just walk out and say, no, we're not doing it, off you go. And you get this little band of merry Sauron followers. They don't realise they're Sauron followers, but obviously the old guy's leading them. So he's like pro Morgoth, pro Sauron. Let's get the fuck away from this elf. Like, you know, we're going to die. If we don't join Sauron, we're going to die. So he breaks off, takes a little group of people with him. We then get a scene where we're in Numenor. And I just have to say, the only real positive about this show is the scenes. The absolute cut scenes of the landscapes, the cinematography, the beautiful lighting. And I don't want to praise stuff that should be a given. This is a multi-billion-pound project. We should absolutely be getting these types of scenes. But I need to see something positive about this show. So the scenes are brilliant. The way they're put together, the way they're shot, the camera angles, the photography, mostly the CGI, especially when you've got it on the castles, the ships, the cities, all that kind of stuff. Looks absolutely beautiful. It looks like a movie. But that is all I've got to say. There's positive about this show. Apart from Durin, but we'll get onto that in a minute. But real nice swooping shot of Numenor. They're getting ready to leave. Then we see Elendil and Isildur. And guys, this is another gripe I've got with this show. They are absolutely fucking over Isildur and Elendil. Both of them are absolutely nothing like their characters. Elendil's kind of like a stoic, I'll do what the queen says. It's not really got a spine. As the lore is, Elendil's a fucking badass. An absolute fucking wrecking machine. And they might build up to that. This might just be their way of building up to that type of character. But don't fuck about. You know, we've not seen anything substantial in this season. Nothing, absolutely nothing substantial has happened in this season. Apart from Meteor Man falling from the sky. But apart from that, that is all we fucking got. We've got people moaning over a rock. We've got people pulling the same faces saying, we need to go to Middle Earth. We need to do da-da-da. It's like, how long have you been doing that? Like, no one's moving anywhere. No one's committed. No one's got any passion in what they're doing. And that is literally it. We had Meteor Man moaning over a rock. Like, elves and dwarves. That battle. That whole argument. We get it. We get the elves don't like the dwarves. We get the dwarves don't like the elves. There's history there. We get it. But it's rammed down our throat every fucking episode. Oh, don't trust the elf. Don't trust the elf. It's like, oh, come on. We need something fresh. We need something new in the dialogue. We're not stupid. Most of us are Lord of the Rings fans. Most of us have read the books. Most of us have seen the movies. Most of us have read all the unarchived material. We get it. The elves don't like the dwarves. There's issues there. But throughout history, you get little sprinkles of hope. You get Elrond and Durin. You get Legolas and Gimli. You get friendships, and it's the strongest bonding friendships you can ever have. And as we know, Legolas and Gimli's story ends that rivalry between elves and dwarves. They go to the Undying Lands together after Lord of the Rings. They sail on the ships to Valinor. Happily ever after. Gimli is the first and only ever dwarf to be let into Valinor. So it just goes to show you the amount of respect the elves have for the dwarves, particularly for what Gimli did in the Fellowship for that whole time. But anyway, we don't need it rammed down our throats. I digress. I can go off on this all day. This could be a 2-hour video, but I'm trying to stay focused to what the episode's about. So I'm really not enjoying the interactions between Elendil and Isildur, but particularly Isildur. They're making him out to be an absolute ass piece. He's spoiled. He's sulking all the time. I want to be on the ship. Even though he made an absolute fuckery of tying a rope to a mast. And I know it was intentional. And there was a reason why he did it. But he's just clinging to that. He's like, give me another chance. But it's like, fuck off, mate. Why don't you just go into the background? Sulk in the background. Let's just see it on your face. And then do something really heroic. And we can bring his character right back into the fold. And make him a genuine sort of person of interest. And a likable hero. By bringing him back in. By doing something absolutely heroic. Instead of just saving some twat from a boat fire. You can make him do something really, really out there. And really sort of interesting. I've got 1,000,001 ideas, Amazon, if you want them. That's the way to write this guy in. That is the way to bring him back into the fold. And make people like Isildur. We know Isildur is the fucker that is absolutely bound to the ring. He doesn't cast it into the fire in the Lord of the Rings. But that doesn't matter. We can sort of counter that. He's not there yet. He's not that guy yet. We need to make him a strong Numenorian prince, ready to ascend the throne. He is a descendant of Numenor. He is a high descendant of Elendil. Elendil is one of the biggest, most powerful kings that has ever walked this fucking earth. And instead, all we're seeing through this series, especially this episode, is Elendil's just kind of stood at the back like, yeah, you know, you can go on the ship, you can't go on the ship. Oh, someone clean up that horse shit over there. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. And Isildur is even worse. They are absolutely destroying his character arc. They're destroying his lore. They're making him look like a whiny little shit. Oh, please let me on. He gets beaten up in this episode as well by, like, random crewmates just because he says, I'll take a beating just to go on the crew again. Please let me go on the crew. It's like, no, that's not Isildur. That's not what Isildur would do. He's not begging for that limelight. He's not begging for... Because he's a fucking prince, for fuck's sake. Why is he on the ship in the first place? Why is he sailing these fucking ships? He should be sat there, basically sniffing his dad's ass seat, ready to claim that throne for when his dad pops it. And there should be scenes with Elendil and Isildur where Elendil is giving him sound advice as a king, sound advice as a warrior, giving him... Not talking about... You didn't tie the rope properly on the ship, so you can't sail with the ship anymore. You're just going to have to settle with scooping horse shit for the rest of your life.
You done fucked up now!
No, you should be saying, stop fucking sulking, here's your fucking sword, go and swipe at that dummy, get better at your archery, and giving him real life lessons as a king. That's the kind of interactions we should be seeing, knowing that eventually Isildur does take his father's place. That whilst very briefly, when Elendil dies, Isildur finds absolute courage, stands up for his father, stands up for Numenor, and goes mental. And to me, it just doesn't make any fucking sense. No sense whatsoever. They're shitting on both of these characters. So we get a pointless scene where they're talking about it. And Elendil kind of says, you know, one day you'll make me proud. One day you'll be on the ship. Fuck it, whatever. We then go to a scene where Halbrand is making a nice little elvish blade. And he's essentially going through blacksmith trials. He gives the blade to the blacksmith. The blacksmith's like, oh yeah, very nice, very nice. And then all of a sudden, we get that sort of inkling, or I did at least, that this is Sauron. He's learning how to forge a blade in Numenor. That's exactly what Sauron needs to know. Is the kind of skill he needs to make the rings of power. So this is why I'm strongly an advocate for Halbrand being Sauron. It just makes sense at this point. Everything we've seen up to this episode is Sauron going in. He's creating little disturbances amongst the Numenorian people. He's creating a divide. He's brought Galadriel on side as an ally. So it all makes sense. And he's learning how to be an absolute expert blacksmith. He's in one of the best forges in the world. And he's learning how to make shit. So this to me is Sauron in the making. And that is the only thing I think will absolutely pay off with this show. If it comes out that Halbrand is Sauron, yes, brilliant, Amazon, you nailed it, love it. We're buying into his character. He's a likable guy. He's doing all the right things. He's got a little bit of a angry side. He's very passionate sometimes. But he's doing all the right things that Sauron should be doing at this point behind the scenes. So if this comes out to be Sauron, I'll let it slide. I'll let this particular story bit slide. Everything else you're shitting on. But if this turns out to be Sauron, yes, love it. So then we get a scene with the blacksmiths, and then we see Galadriel and Halbrand talking to Queen Mithril about the battle tactics, what they're going to do when they're in Middle-earth, how they're going to get there, what they're going for first. We then get the same old shit, the same old jostling for position, political intrigue. It's just boring. It's absolutely dead boring. I don't care about their politics. I don't understand those war council meetings where they're constantly stood around the same fucking table, and Galadriel's kind of doing the same old faces, the same shit. Nothing really gets decided either. They just say, yeah, we're doing what's right for our people, the elves and the Numenorians. It's like, it's just really poor script writing, really poor dialogue, pointless interactions, pointless scenes, and we get the whole Galadriel coming out as a stroppy teenager. I just want to put this on your radar, guys, right? I know I keep saying this show's against the law, and I'm not against that. I'm not against them going against the law. If they want to do something original and different to the books, fair enough. But what they're doing is taking snippets of the lore and making it completely different. It's like you either need to be in one camp or the other. You either need to recreate what we sort of read in the books, what we've seen in the movies, what we know about the characters, or go completely off-piste and make something completely unrelated. Now, Amazon have been very clear in saying it's not going to be anything to do with the lore. Or if it is, it's going to be very small aspects of it. Fine. but the delivery on it has to be absolutely excellent. What they're making out Galadriel to be is a stroppy teenager hell-bent on revenge. What she should be at this point is she is the daughter of arguably the most powerful elf that's ever lived. Her dad is named after a fucking star, the brightest star in the galaxy, right? And she's going around, I'm taking revenge. I want to kill Sauron because he killed my brother. What about the thousands of other of your kin that was piled up? Do you know all the helmets that you added a helmet to? And all of a sudden you care? Like, it's weird. It doesn't make any sense. And the way that they're making Galadriel out to be is, as I said, a stroppy teenager. She's hell-bent on revenge when she shouldn't be. She should be about doing the right thing. But she keeps hammering home about she can't let her brother's death lie. She's holding on to grief. That ain't Galadriel. Galadriel is the fucking epiphany of hope. She is the beacon of light. She's the purest of beings in all of Middle-earth. And this one is all about doing fucking fancy sword dances. Pulling the same smouldering face like she's constipated all the time. And just... it makes no sense. It makes no fucking sense whatsoever. I try it as best as I can to try and forget what I'm seeing. But Galadriel is the main character of this show, right? And how many of you actually give a shit about her motives? We should. This is the thing. Even if we're going down the vengeance route and she's avenging her brother, we should absolutely be angry for her. We should be upset for her. We should want her to get revenge. But then you question yourself, is this Galadriel? Is this Lord of the Rings? Is this how this plays out? No, it's not. What are we doing here? Is this Lord of the Rings, or is this just some fantasy TV show that's gone wrong? And unfortunately, it's a fantasy TV show that's gone wrong, but it's got the Lord of the Rings name above the door, which makes it even worse. So Galadriel, again, in this episode, absolutely fucking hate how they're portraying Galadriel, guys, and I don't see it getting any better. Like I said, she's got no motive, she's breathing revenge, she just keeps saying the same shit, the same dialogue. Oh, it's for my people, don't forget, And in this episode, I swear to God, she's swallowed like a dictionary. She's just coming out with loads of metaphors to every person that she speaks to. Or the purest of things doesn't come from swallowing seawater. What the fuck? Oh, hang on, you need to get to the light, you need to go through a bit of darkness. It's like, mate, it's just cheesy. It's borderline cheesy. It's lazy fucking writing. And I'm sick of hearing the same dialogue. I'm sick of hearing the same smouldering look that she gives everybody. It's like, there's no passion. There's no passion in what you're trying to tell us. You're trying to convince us of your personal struggle. You're trying to convince us of, what your interests are. And you're supposed to help us believe that you're doing this for your people. But at the back of that, you've carried the sorrow of your brother's death, the murder of your brother. I get that. But the forefront of it should be justice, not vengeance, justice. Doing what's right for your people, doing what's right for the future kind of Middle-earth, not just for the elves. But she keeps banging on about the fucking elves, about restoring her honor, restoring the valor of her people. And it's like, you gave the Numenorians Numenor. You don't need to restore anything. You guys are up there. Like, I know there's people out there that are bitter towards the elves, but that's because they've had shit done to them that they blame the elves for. Galadriel doesn't need to prove jack shit, but she spends most of her time going through that pro-feminist movement of, oh, it's power to the people, and I'm the strongest person here, and look, I can take on 20 men with a sword. It's like, that ain't Galadriel. That ain't Galadriel. If you want to do that shit, absolutely fine with you doing that shit, but do not say that it's Lord of the Rings, because it's not. You cannot say it's Rings of Power. You cannot say that's Galadriel, because I might as well put Kratos in a fucking chef's hat and ask him to start grilling steaks like Gordon Ramsay, and just say it's Hell's Kitchen, but it's in Kratos' house.
Madam! Madam!
Yes, sir!
Take your jacket off and
Oh, stop, don't say that, please!
We then get another scene of the Harfoots, as if this episode couldn't get any worse. You see another scene with the fucking Harfoots, and I never get used to seeing Lenny Henry as a hobbit or a tree folk or whatever you want to call it. But his acting's atrocious in this. I think all of the Hobbit people are. They're just fucking shit. There's no reason for them to be in the show. Other than, I think it's going to be a little sprinkle at the end of this series. We're going to see the Shire, basically. They're going to move to a place called the Grove. and they're going to build these hills, and they're going to build like little settlements and a little pub at the end of the road, and people are going to go, oh my god, it's the Shire. And it's like, very casual Lord of the Rings fans are going to look at that and go, yeah, that makes sense now. I'm happy with the Harfoots now. Yeah, it makes sense. They're the early hobbits. They're, you know, they become the Baggins and stuff like that. It's like, that's where it comes from, so it's okay. No, it's not. It's fucking not. Hate it. Stop it. Let's get them out, get them off the show. Kill them off. I wanted the wargs to eat at least one of them. At least one of them in this fucking scene where we get the wargs. And let's touch on the wargs, shall we? The wargs look absolutely atrocious. It's like a chihuahua crossed with a pygmy goat with fucking gremlin fur. It looks, I don't know what it is. You guys look at it and you go back and look at the wargs on The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The budget was less and they look better. I don't know where they've got the design for these fucking wargs from, but they look atrocious. But anyway, we then get a scene where the Harfoots are walking through the forest. Nori and chums are running towards Dad, saying, oh, Dad, help, you know, we're being chased, shit. And there's a pack of wargs coming after him. They get cornered against a tree. Just as the wargs are closing in, who turns up? Mr. Stranger Man. He turns up, gives them the old ground slam, smashes them off into the distance. Wargs go rolling, and then that essentially scares them, and then they run off. So we get it. The stranger's got power. We get that he's got an affinity to animals in some respects, and he's learning to hone that power. And then obviously Nori's like, oh my god, you saved us, thank you so much. And then we get a whole scene after where he's trying to talk about his feelings when he was going through that, because you can see anger when he's delivering that blow to the wargs. And there's obviously a conflict there between what he's been sent to Middle Earth to do and what he's actually finding within his human body is as emotion. I think it's Gandalf. It points to it being Gandalf. And I can see at the end of this series, when they settle into the Shire, he's going to put a nice little grey hat on, put his little robe on, he'll get his staff, and then he'll become Gandalf, because it makes sense. That's the only real thing that is going to make sense in all of this, is that if the Meteor Man is Gandalf. Again, I don't like how they're portraying him. Gandalf is a Maya, for anyone that doesn't know. He's a fucking spirit that's been sent from God to help fight Sauron. So the fact that he goes into that body and can't speak very well, or he's speaking the old tongue, and he can't control his emotion and stuff like that, makes me think that he's absolutely, you know, it's atrocious how they've written him in. The way that it's done in the books is that all the 5 wizards come in on a boat, and I know you want to add dramatic effect and stuff like that, but can you imagine a scene at the end of the episode, or the end of this series, as part of the ending scenes, that you get a nice little boat come off, you get a couple of wizards you can't quite make out, and then you see Gandalf, and then you see Saruman, and then it ends. Imagine that shit. Like, just the feeling of that. It's like, yes, the Astari. The Astari's here, but we've got this. And I get it's a different direction. I admire the passion in trying to deliver it in a different way. I understand it. I get it. But I don't like it. I don't like it. It's just not landing well for me. I just don't like the delivery of it whatsoever. We then get what is arguably the worst scene of this episode. We see Galadriel training some of the Numenorian soldiers. These guys, by the way, should be about 7 or 8 fucking foot. Absolute monsters. Some of the best armies that's ever walked Middle-earth. High Kings of Numenor. Strong bloodline. Absolute warriors, right? And here comes little Galadriel strolling in with a sword. And again, it's that pro-feminine thing where she's trying to teach him a lesson. She's trying to say, you know, you've got to be more agile. You've got to be more like me. You've got to be more light on your feet to beat an orc. And the line that made me absolutely nearly cry with what the fuck is, as she's delivering this training to the soldier, she says, do you know how to kill the orc in the absolute best way? She gets her sword out, and I shit you not, she says, stab, twist, and gut. What? Stab, twist, and gut. What the actual fuck? Stab, twist, and gut. This is a person that's supposed to be thousands of years old, that is a veteran, that's seen combat. She's seen combat. She's wise beyond her fucking years, right? She's older than the sun. And her best advice she can give to arguably already very well-trained soldiers in how to murder orcs is stab, twist, gut. Who wrote that line? Who wrote that shit into that show? You need to be gone. You need to get your ass out of there. My fucking 7-year-old son can write better dialogue than that. Damn! We then get a cocky twat that's wants to be the next second lieutenant or whatever it is, comes up and he wants to give Galadriel a go. He wants to give her a show. She then takes on about 50 fucking soldiers on her own in a nice little sparring type dance. But the guy kind of learns what she's trying to teach them a little bit, uses his agility, not just his strength, and kind of overcomes her, knocks the sword out of her hand. And then she's like, congratulations, second lieutenant. And I'm like, oh, please, let's skip. We then get a scene where Pharazôn is, I think it's pronounced Pharazôn, the blue robe guy, big beard, Numenorian counselor to the queen. He's sat talking to another twat about sailing to Numenor, sailing to Middle-earth, and that Numenor is going for power, it's trying to redeem itself, it's trying to break away from needing the elves and all that kind of stuff. And the guy is basically saying to Pharazôn that, you know, why are we following the elves? Why are we always under the elf shadow? And the guy Pharazôn kind of looks at him and goes, you think you're doing this for the elves? Like, we're doing this for our people. We're going to go to Middle-earth. We're going to put a queen or a king over there. And we're not doing it for Galadriel. She thinks we're doing it for her. It kind of gives that old, oh, you know, we've got our own agenda. And it goes a little bit Game of Thrones in the sense that they're trying to sort of put out their own house out there. We're not doing it for them. We're doing it for us. They don't know that. And when we go over there, we're going to have our own agenda. We're going to build our own little city and our own little village. And it comes across a little bit like that. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in terms of what Pharazôn's been like in the final prior episodes. All of a sudden now he's betraying Galadriel. All of a sudden he's got an agenda. He's just a counselor. Who the fuck is he? All of a sudden he wants pride. He wants power. He wants more than what the Queen's offering him. And every scene that we've seen him in, where he's talking about what he wants and how he's going to support his queen, he's actually been quite honest and loyal to this point. And all of a sudden, he's becoming a snake in the grass. He wants to go off and do what he wants to do. All for what? For the sake of drama? For the sake of questions, answers? Who knows? We then get another scene, aren't we lucky, with Nori and the stranger. He's chanting away and he's got his hand in some water and actually it's turning into ice. The ice is slowly going up his arm. Not quite, I can't quite work out what's going on here. But anyway, Nori says, you know, stop it, what you doing? Grabs his arm and the ice engulfs her as well. She then gets an absolute vision of flame, shadow, all that sort of thing. And initially I thought, this must be Sauron. This must be... She's seeing his plans in terms of what he's there to do as he's growing in power, all that kind of stuff. But I think what she's seeing is perhaps what he's sent there to fight. So she's seeing Sauron, she's seeing the darkness growing, she's seeing the armies building, the forges burning, people being tortured, because the stranger is sent there to fight that. That's what he's gone in to go up against, basically. I don't get the whole ice thing yet, but the very quick, very basic human thought process in me thought fire and ice. Sauron's fire, flame, shadow. All of a sudden he's chanting in the water and he's building up ice to combat the fire. I don't know. Fuck knows. Hopefully that gets explained later on in another episode, but it probably won't. The way that this show's being written, God knows. It's probably just going to come out that he's a portable ice cube maker, that he can make a mean coffee, and that Nori is able to sustain that coffee by adding in 2 lumps of fucking sugar. Who knows? Who knows? It could go absolutely anywhere. We then get a feast scene in the halls of Khazad-dûm, or at Linden, I think it is actually. And I really enjoy Durin's character. This is one of the very few things I am actually enjoying about this show, is how they're portraying Durin. The acting with Durin is brilliant. He's got that comedy value there, but it's believable, it's funny. He's kind of bringing the Durin the second or third type of theme, where we had Billy Connolly in The Hobbit. Wasn't delivered the greatest, but there was aspects of it that was quite humorous, quite relatable, kind of like the Mad Uncle sort of thing. We see that in Durin, and we do see a great relationship between Durin and Elrond, where we get Legolas and Gimli in Lord of the Rings. We here get Durin and Elrond, and whilst it's not, I don't think, as enjoyable to watch play out, we still get that same vibe. We still get that same sort of heartwarming friendship. We get the sense that it is going to build into them fighting side by side. Durin's got a lot of respect for Elrond vice versa. They're both trying to do the right thing for their houses, the right thing for their race. And obviously they're being pushed and pulled by different people who've got different agenda. So Gil-galad is actually trying to use Elrond to get hold of the last Silmaril, trying to get hold of Mithril to sustain his immortality. Again, that's not what Gil-galad's about, but that's the story for another day. Another character that is shitting on. And with Durin, he's being pushed and pulled around by his dad. So his dad's very much grumpy, very much the old school dwarf. Never trust an elf. Durin is probably my favourite character in the show, only because I think it's the only character that they're not pissing on in any way, shape or form. I think it's very true to his lore. I think they've done a great job at writing him as a character, and that's the difficulty. I get the sense that the writing team for Durin is different for any other writing team in this show. I don't know. Maybe one person brought up Durin in this show and the others are different entities. I don't know, but it just feels very separate to what we're seeing, which is refreshing to see. But unfortunately, it is a sort of light and dark contrast. There's just they're polar opposites to what you see. So anyway, we get a feast scene between Durin, Gil-galad, and Elrond. They send the cheers to Noldor and Khazad-dûm, the bringing of the relationship together. There's a bit of a flexing match between Gil-galad and Durin, and then Durin oddly says, "Where did you get this table from?" And Gil-galad's like, "Oh, I can't recall. It's a table that's been here for many years." Durin then says, "This type of material only grows underground at a certain depth. You have to go so far down to get this material. My kin have been buried in this, my forefathers. It's very sacred to me, and we're sat here eating off of it, basically." Kind of like a tense moment. Gil-galad says, "Sorry about that. Didn't realize. Don't mean to offend you. As a gesture of goodwill, as a sorry, you can take the table home with you and do what you want with it." Bit of an odd thing to spend a whole scene talking about a fucking table, but I get the whole gesture behind it. We then see Gil-galad and Elrond arguing about the relationship with the dwarves. Elrond is obviously very pro-dwarf. He's very much not selfish, not sort of egotistical. He sees the benefits of working with the dwarves, and he wants to be able to bring people together for the genuine good. Gil-galad, on the other hand, is trying to gain the favour of the dwarves by trying to get hold of the jewels. He says to Elrond that the reason why we need to get hold of the jewels is not only to save our people, to secure our immortality, but to actually save Middle-earth, because the power we can get from these jewels will be able to stop Sauron. Again, pissed me off because Gil-galad's character is not like that. In the books, in the movies, that he is a character that is absolutely sung about. He's the last High King of Noldor, and he's on par with Elendil, so he should have a very natural brilliance about him, a very intellectual approach to how he speaks to people, the way he looks at the world, the way he looks at the sort of other races, elves or not. He should be a very much powerful, impressionable, and very well respected person. But at this point, he comes across a little bit like how they wrote Thranduil's character in The Hobbit, where at least in the beginning and right up until the end, he's very selfish, very driven by his own passions, wants the Silmarils, wants the jewels. It's all about pride, power, all about his name, about his house, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, by the end of The Hobbit, he sort of realizes the error of his ways, that he's done wrong by Legolas, he's done wrong by his people. He allowed himself to get too greedy, basically. And Gil-galad seems to be a carbon copy of this type of writing. The issue I've got is that it's Gil-galad. This is not him at all. It's almost like trying to get Gandalf to act like Frodo. It just doesn't make sense. But also, the way that they deliver this is atrociously obvious. It's like, come on, we get it. There's people on both sides that have got their own agenda. They don't want to go down the whole relationship route. They don't want to see the benefits in anything. But this guy should. Gil-galad should. He should give a shit about other relationships. He's in the position of High King of the Noldor Elves. He should be absolutely straight focused, empathetic, compassionate to all races and walks of life. But we just see him in this episode very much greedy, very much wanting to get hold of the last Silmarils. And we absolutely feel, I don't know if it was intentional, but we absolutely feel that he's after it for the jewels. Doesn't give a shit about anything else, and that's all he cares about. So we get a back and forth between Elrond and Gil-galad. Gil-galad shows Elrond the tree of Manwë, and we get a nice little scene. And it's a scene I did enjoy. The CGI was really good. We saw Manwë fighting the Balrog, and basically how he poured his light into the tree. And it's the trees, and it's the light of the earth, and it's light of the stars that keep the elves from diminishing, basically. So when they sail to Valinor every year, every spring, they go off into the Undying Lands to become immortal, everlasting spirits. And what Gil-galad's trying to say to Elrond is that, look at this tree, it's dwindling, you can see tar, you can see darkness to overtaking it. And he said, this is just the outside, imagine what's happening inside. And he's kind of referring it to what's happening out in the real world, i.e. Sauron growing in power, his people's light diminishing, and he says we need Mithril, we need that ore, we need the Silmarils to bring more light into the world. So he kind of says, he plants a seed into Elrond's mind that he needs to buy Durin's favour and steal or do whatever he needs to do to get hold of those ores. Elrond naturally says, I made a promise, I'm not going to tell you what they've got, I'm not going to tell you what I witnessed. But Gil-galad's like, well, you're choosing that over the death of your people, basically. And it leaves Elrond kind of a little bit of a sour taste in his mouth in terms of what he needs to do. Does he betray his friend, or does he save his people? So we then get a scene where Numenor is partying for the parting. Did you like what I did there? Isildur, again, is begging to be part of the sea crew. He takes a beating from a group of people. He absolutely says, what have I got to do to get on the ship? And obviously we've got the second lieutenant now, who sort of disarmed Galadriel, so he's gained status. He's the leader of the crews and all that kind of stuff. And Isildur's just begging, absolutely begging to be let on the ship. As I said, they're making his character look awful, ridiculous. And it's the way that he's portrayed in this scene, he's just the runt of the litter. He wants the scraps. But Isildur should be the prince of the High King of Numenor, and he's not. So, the boat, we then get a scene where there's a guy that hops onto one of the Numenorian ships. He's got a lantern. He walks into the back of the cargo hold, and he basically opens all the ale, all the wine in the ale starts flowing out of the barrel, and he's going to set it on fire. So obviously this is someone that's working with Farazon, the guy who is trying to put an end to the strategic power of Numenor and build a little rift. I think this is where the rebellion is partly going to come in from. So he tries to set fire to the boat. Just as he's about to do that, he hears a little rustle to the side, pulls the sort of rag off, and he sees that Isildur is in the ship. He's there, and he's basically biding his time in the hold to sneak on and go away. Again, it's a desperate attempt to make Isildur look like a strong character. Oh, he's going against the grain. He's not doing what he's told. It just makes him look spoiled. It makes him look like, one, he can't take feedback, but also it's just totally against his character. It's totally against his nature. He's just spoiled. He's selfish. He's just a brat, basically. But Isildur notices that the guy's about to set the boat on fire, tries to put a stop to it. The lantern drops. Boat goes up in flames anyway. Mass explosion. Obviously, everyone comes running to the port. Well, what's happening? What's happening? The next scene is Isildur swimming to shore. He saves the guy that tried to set the boat on fire. And Elendil sort of kneels down and says, what happened? Talk to me. And Isildur's like, oh, you know, the boat just went up in flames. And the guy that he just saved said, oh, yeah, he saved me. Didn't have to. He could have swam off the shore, but he came back for me. And it's like, why would you not rat him out? He's just tried to destroy a boat that, one, you were on, but two, he's trying to create like a mutiny amongst the captains. He's trying to create an issue between the queen and the little rebellion that's going on underneath within the people. And Isildur didn't say anything. He just sort of said, yeah, you know, that's what I do. Just to gain his status as a crewmate. Made no sense. We then get a council meeting where Farazon is basically trying to encourage the queen to end the voyage. So we know it's come from Farazon because that's where the motive is. And Galadriel gives the whole faith speech again. Absolutely boring. We got to do this for our people. Come on, remember what we're fighting for. You're a queen. Blah, blah, blah. Same old shit. We then get a scene where Celebrimbor is talking about the Mithril's light. He's talking to Elrond and he says, this ore could help us win the upcoming war. We're going to need it. So it's kind of tying into what Gil-galad said. And he then says to Elrond that the High King's actually deceived you. That you're going to have to make a choice between your people or saving your friend. So again, we get the whole conflict. Does Elrond grass Gil-galad up to Durin but save his friendship, or does he turn his back on his people? And we get that whole scene. We then get a scene with Galadriel talking to Halbrand, and she says, I'm sorry for betraying you. Halbrand's hammering away at making stuff. We don't actually see what he's making. Could be one of the Rings of Power. And I'm telling you now, if the Rings of Power are made off screen, I'll be fucking fuming. This show is built around, it's called The Rings of Power. We need to see these things made. If it takes time and it goes over the course of multiple seasons or episodes, fine. But if they're made off screen and they're just handed in a side dialogue, I'm done. I'm absolutely fucking done with this show. I'm done. I'm going to park it and that will be the last episode. So he's making something. We then get a flashback scene where Halbrand is talking about what happened in the past, i.e. when he walked away and his people walked away. He said, you didn't see what happened. They're not going to ask me to go back to them just like you won't. And we get a scene where sort of the people that broke away from Arondir's group are doing the same thing. They're bowing down to Adar, and there's an old guy that basically says, I give myself to you, Adar, Sauron, blah, blah, blah. And Adar kind of looks at him and he says, are you not Sauron? And he goes for the old guy, strangles him up a little bit, then grabs a kid that's in the group and then pulls a blade out, chucks it to the old guy and says, if you're a follower, you need to bind that in blood. Essentially saying, if you're a man of your word and you're saying you're a follower of Sauron, Morgoth or whatever, you need to kill this kid. We get a scene then where the kid's like, please don't, please don't. And then the old guy walks forwards, goes to take a shot. And then we get a scene where Arondir's teaching Theo how to shoot an arrow. So we get the impression that the old guy did kill the boy and he's sort of sealed his fate. I'm willing to bet that the old guy will become a Nazgul. I think he's rising in power as a human. He's kind of got a Numenorian descent, but you know, not all the Nazgul were kings. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they were, but there were some of them in there that were kings of men, but some of them were sort of high up kings, or sort of high up advisors of men. So I think this guy is going to get a special seat in the House of Sauron. I don't know whether he'll become a lieutenant, whether he'll become potentially the Witch King, I don't know, but I think the Witch King in particular is actually an old king of men, one of the highest kings of men, so it might end up being Isildur, who knows? They might turn Isildur into a fucking Witch King, who knows? But anyway, that goes to that. So this is the scene I was talking about earlier where I said I don't think Adar is Sauron, only because he reacted in absolute anger when the guy turned around and said, are you not Sauron? It's almost like Adar was saying, I'm better than Sauron, I'm different than Sauron. So I don't know if there's his own little group going on, or if he's going to be an original character, or I don't know. Who knows? But I don't think it is Sauron. I'd be very surprised if it is, because it won't make sense and it won't tie into what we've seen so far. But the show has a knack of doing that, so fuck knows. As I said, we then get a scene with Arondir. He's talking to Theo about how to shoot an arrow, raise your bow, raise yourself up. We get all that shit. Then he's talking to Bronwyn about securing the tower and things like that. And then Theo sort of sees a bit of light in Arondir and he says, you know what, you're not all that bad. He then talks to him about the totem. He shows Arondir the totem, and as if by magic, Arondir's like, this is a key. He turns around, he pulls some reeds off the side of a wall, and all of a sudden there's a fucking shrine there, a door. Oh, it just so happens to be where they're stood. Magically. Amazing. Didn't have to travel anywhere to use that key. They were just in the right place at the right fucking time. And anyway, Arondir's like, it's some sort of key. Bronwyn's like, what is it? And Arondir's like, dunno, it's a key for something. So let's try and find out what it is. That's the end of that. Then they start talking about how they're going to defend the tower. Arondir says there's got to be another way. We have to do something. Bronwyn's kind of on the brink of giving up. Arondir's like, don't give up. You know, your people have built so many years trying to build up to be the absolute best that they can be, restore their honor, and now you're just willing to throw it away. And Bronwyn's like, yeah, but what are we going to do? And Arondir's like, I don't know, there must be another way. It's a bit like the crows in the Jungle Book. So what are you going to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. It's like that. We get that back and forth scene. Bronwyn says the tower will fall when they march, and they kind of look at each other, look up and go, that's the trick. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to sabotage the tower when all the orcs march on it, and it's going to collapse them and kill them. That was the master plan. We then get a scene where the elves are carrying the table through the forest for Durin. So obviously Gil-galad's given up the table based on the scene earlier. There's quite a funny interaction when Elrond sort of looks at Durin and says, you made all that shit up, didn't you, about the table? And Durin's like, well, my wife's been wanting a new table for years. So it's a really cool scene, really funny. And as I said, the one good thing that is coming out of this show is the relationship between Elrond and Durin. It's not enough to sustain the show. It's not enough for me to give it any extra points, but it is scenes that I am enjoying watching. So it's quite funny. You get that sort of Durin dwarf-like behavior, that the way that they act, the way that they're so brash, and they take the piss out of people without you knowing it. Really sarcastic and quite fun to watch. We then get a nice sort of heartwarming scene where Elrond tells Durin about how his kind will die. That includes him if they don't secure Mithril. They have to use the power of Mithril in order to create better weapons, better sort of artifacts, better things that they can use in war, but also the light of Mithril itself will sustain their soul. So that kind of brings Durin to stand there and think, so you're telling me I've got the whole elven race in the palm of my hands? And everyone's like, yeah. And he's like, who is it again that's got the whole race in the... And he's like, you. And he's like, so who makes the decision about whether the elves live or die? And he's like, you. She's like playing to his power a little bit. Durin likes that cheeky build up of, yeah, I'm in charge. He loves feeling like he's always out on top, very competitive. Elrond gives in to him, very intellectual. He knows what he's doing. He knows how Durin works. And he's just kissing ass, basically saying, yep, you're in charge. You do what you want. Our race of people, their lives, their legacy, everything's on the line. If you let us share the spoils of Mithril to our benefit as well as yours, we share it, we can sustain each other. But ultimately, it's down to you if we live or die. And Durin loves that power. He loves that, but not in like a Sauron type of way, not in a dark way, just in a very much like, a very cheeky, I'm holding the world in the palm of my hands. If I want to, I could squeeze it, but we know he's not going to. So he accepts. He says to Elrond, let's do it. Get all your feather-cloaked friends together and let's walk back to Khazad-dûm. Let's sort this out. Elrond's like, yeah, let's love it. Let's do it. The final scenes we get is Halbrand is summoned to the Queen, and we see Isildur marching alongside the Numenorian soldiers. They're boarding the ships, ready to go to Middle-earth. So he's all smiles. He's got his way, all because he saved some randomer from a boat. All of a sudden, all the things he's done before has been undone. Nothing really substantial other than he saved a fellow Numenorian. Great. Nobody of noble stature or anything like that. But anyway, he's now on the crew. He stood on the ship and he sort of says, one of the captains comes up to him and says, oh, you need to report to the Horsemaster. And Isildur's like, oh, I thought I was in part of the cavalry. And he's like, you are. And he chucks him the sticks to pick up the horse shit, basically, and says, you're a stable sweep. So Isildur's like, oh, man, not as great as I thought it was going to be. We get that sort of scene. We then get Galadriel boarding the ship. Everyone's like, oh my god, that woman that beat us all up. She walks to the front of the ship. Everyone's in awe. We then see Halbrand, who has joined Galadriel. So finally, he's succumbed to his arrogance. He's let it go, and he's overcome it. He's basically listened to Galadriel. They're going to sail to Middle-earth together, and then we get a whole set a course for Middle-earth scene, and that's it. That's it, guys. That is literally it. The show is done, over, finished, finito. Episode 5. So, all in all, atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. If I was to give this a rating, it's a 3 out of 10. Below average TV. Below average storytelling. Terrible characters. Terrible acting. CGI is shit on the whole.
Fucking diabolical.
I love the landscape and the sort of swooping scenes where they look at Numenor. They sort of bring into the scenery. But everything else, the wargs, some of the battle scenes, like the scene with Galadriel and she's fighting the bloke, some of it's clever swordplay. It looks quite good, quite believable. But I'd like to think with scenes like that, you're going to get a real swordsmaster in and actually teach your cast how to fight, how it would work, how the footwork would move, to make it look more believable, more real. But there's elements of the fighting that look absolutely animatronic. It looks like you're playing a video game. The physics are off, the balance is off, and ironically, Galadriel in those scenes is talking about balance and agility, and it looks like she's hacking. It looks like she's able to float over swords and do weird body move shit like that. I don't buy it. I don't buy the whole Galadriel being a swordsmith anyway, and like a soldier, someone that uses a weapon. She should be a fucking necromancer at this point, but that's just my opinion. So unfortunately, guys, another flop of an episode. I hoped it was going to do a U-turn from episode 4, but it hasn't. In my opinion, it's got worse. At least in episode 4, there were elements that I could enjoy. In this one, apart from the scenes with Durin and Elrond, I absolutely fucking hated it. Everything about this was crap. Hated the Harfoots. Don't care much about the Stranger anymore. Even when they come out and say it's Sauron, it's Saruman, it's a Balrog, it's Gandalf, I don't care. I don't care. I've gone past it now. The show is so bad that I don't care about the good elements as and when we get them. No matter how many times you sprinkle pixie dust on dog shit, it's still dog shit with pixie dust. Just the little bits that you see that are brilliant, that you like and you enjoy, is not good enough to outweigh the colossal shit show that is Rings of Power at the moment, unfortunately. As a Lord of the Rings fan, I absolutely want this show to soar. I want it to do well. I don't know what they're doing with this series. I don't know where they're going. And the problem is, I don't care either. I don't give a shit where it's going, and that's the problem. We're 5 episodes deep, and you tell me what's happened. We've had a little bit of a dialogue back and forth in Numenor. Some bloke's fallen from the sky. Durin's found some stones. That is it. Fuck all else has happened. Absolutely nothing's happened. We've not seen any grand battles, and it's not always about that, but we've not seen any grand takeovers. We've not seen any fights. We've not seen any skirmishes. We still don't know who Sauron is. We're getting an overload of characters, but they're so bland and watered down that I don't feel attached to any of them whatsoever, which is why I'm giving it a 3. Terrible writing, terrible acting. They're fucking the lore up for so many of the characters that I love. I could not wait. When I heard that they were going to have Gil-galad in this show, I could not wait to see how they delivered it. You didn't disappoint, Amazon. You didn't disappoint. Elrond's okay in most of his scenes. Durin is my absolute favourite. He's the only character I feel they've absolutely nailed. Arondir I didn't care about. Harfoots I don't care about. Fucking even Elendil and Isildur I don't care about.
Crap. 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 Crap.
Galadriel's the worst as well. She's the main character, but the way that they're... I can go on about it forever, guys. It's 3 out of 10. Don't watch it. Do not watch it. Watch House of the Dragon instead. That is becoming a perfect blend of script writing, storytelling, character dialogue. Just the way that you get emotionally invested in the scene. You feel tense. You think, shit, who's going to die? Someone's going to say something. Something's going to happen. There's constant drama. There's constant churning in your stomach because you're seeing the stuff that you loved about Game of Thrones. You don't get that here. You just get a very heavily budgeted TV series that is fucking astronomically bad. It's going downhill. It's nosediving. And as a fan, I feel gutted. I feel absolutely betrayed and gutted that it's going this way. I'm going to keep saying it. I'm just going to keep saying it. Hopefully it will get better. But the chances are, if we've got this so early on, which is the point in the first season you should be gripped, and naturally, as the episodes and the series goes on, it dies off, it gets boring, that's when you have to call it. If we're getting this now, in the very first season, what is going to happen in season 2, 3, 4? Because they've already signed off on 4 seasons, guys. You have to bear that in mind. Where the fuck is this going? And it's worrying me. So that's my review of episode 5. I left myself half an hour before I came up and did a review because I was fuming. I was absolutely raging. They're shitting on my favourite franchise. Just as bad as episode 4, if not worse, unfortunately. Stay tuned next week for episode 6. Hopefully, it's going to be even better. If not, I'm going to be in a rocking chair, smashing my face into the wall, chanting all sorts of speech, and I just can't take it anymore, guys. Depending on how this series ends, but I don't think anything really is going to redeem it. Nothing at all is going to redeem it. I think I'm done with the next season. I'm not even going to attempt to watch it, unfortunately, but I know these reviews bring joy to many people on a comedic level, so I'm glad to have shared my frustrations with you and made your day a little bit better, you fuckers. But anyway, that's me done, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. It's been a long one, but stay tuned for episode 6. Hopefully it gets better. Stay tuned for more content on the channel, and don't forget to let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode as well. Do you think I'm being too harsh? Is there stuff I've missed? Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. Don't watch the episode, and I'll see you again soon. Peace.